There are so many ways that you can use props to adapt your movement practices to make them work for you and your body in the day that you're in, as well as help you make these practices more accessible to your students if you happen to be a teacher. Today, I'll share with you 5 variations of downward dog using a chair. And now, for most of these, you can really get away with any kind of chair. If you do happen to have a yoga style chair or a metal folding chair, that's great. But I really encourage you to try it out with whatever you have access to. We'll start with the most simple seated variation of downward dog and work progressively into more challenging as well as more complex prop setups. So stop whenever you need to and just work with what works for you today. We'll also use a little bit of wall space as well as a couple blocks and blankets. If you have those available, go ahead and gather everything. And if you don't know me, my name is Rebecca Joe. I'm a yoga teacher and a movement practitioner, and I specialize in adapting practices with props. Working with props allows us not only to have more access to a shape because of the support that it gives, but it also gives us this point of contact and feedback and this line of communication between our inner world and the environment around us. So I hope you enjoy this. Go ahead and gather all of your stuff together and we will get started. Our first version of downward dog will be a seated variation. All you need is a chair. It can be any kind of chair really, and a wall. Now this version is, a bit different than what we think of as a downward facing dog, which is an inversion shape with your heart above your head and your hands on the ground. The reason I like this variation, one, is it's really great for anyone who is unable to get out of their chair or cannot put their head beneath their heart. But it's also a really great practice to play with the shape of downward dog without having to use that effort in your upper body and really kind of struggle to hold yourself up. To set up this shape, sit in front of the wall or have your student sit in front of the wall. Come towards the edge of the seat, extend your legs, place the balls of your feet about hips distance on the wall. Heels will stay on the ground, and you do want to be able to maintain a little bit of a bend in the knees here. So do what you need to do to shift forward and back and get yourself in that shape. And then you'll start to feel this fold at your hips, wiggling the bones of your seat back and tilting yourself a little bit more forward towards your pubic bone. That in itself may feel like it's enough work. You can hold on to the back of the chair to help you find that fold. Finding the back bend in the shape. In every downward dog, there is both a fold and a back bend. And then after a few breaths, if that feels okay for you and you can easily reach, you'll start to extend your hands to the wall, walking your fingertips up as you continue to fold at your hips, keeping that bend in the knees. Put a light pressure into the wall with the balls of the feet, into the floor with your heels, so that you start to feel your legs doing a little bit of work there. And then keeping that length in your spine, you can play with crawling your hands up further, head in line with your arms. Take your breath into the sides and back of your ribs. If it feels like a strain in your lower body, you can always come a little bit closer to the wall, and then you'll slowly release as you're ready. In variation 2, we'll begin standing. As you see, I have moved the chair to the wall. That's just to give a little bit of extra stability. You may not need that. If your chair is a little wobbly, it just gives you a little bit of security as you start to put some weight on the chair. Stand behind the chair. Hands will come onto the back of the chair. Step yourself back, bend your knees, feel that fold at your hips. And then you can play with this. This may be as far as you want to go, gripping onto the chair. You can start to move your hands towards the sides. You can hold the back of the chair like a steering wheel. And then from there, playing with that wrap of your shoulders, letting your upper body sink a little bit lower. If you feel pretty good there, you can stretch your hands onto the seat, shifting forward and back as you need for your proportions. And you might even start to bring your hands down to the legs. And so you're getting more into that classic downward dog shape. The lower you go, the more challenging this is going to be on both your legs and your shoulders. Play with that to the degree that it feels good for you today. When you're ready, you'll start to step yourself forward, climb your hands back up, and slowly come back up to stand. Variation 3 is very similar to variation 2, but this time we'll place our hands on the seat of the chair. I've moved away from the wall, but you could also still use the wall with the back of the chair against it for extra stability and support, especially if you have a chair that's not quite as sturdy. For this one, you'll step forward, place your hands on the seat of the chair, or alternatively, you could wrap your hands around the edges of the seat if you happen to have this kind of chair. Step yourself back, putting a bend in your knees. So as you land, your sitting bones are over your heels. heels, and you have this long downward slope from your tail lifting up to your crown extending out towards the chair. If your hands are wrapped around the side, you can feel your index finger here plugging in, start to play with that rotation of your armpits towards your chest, and staying there for as long as it's interesting for you. Keeping that fold in the hips, the bend in the knees, rooting back through your heels. Finding this length as you reach back through your sitting bones, you can kind of press the chair away to elongate yourself even more. Step forward as you're ready and rise up to stand. In variation 4, you will need a chair that you're able to flip as I have. It doesn't necessarily have to be a yoga chair. It could be any sort of metal folding chair, but you do want to make sure that you can have it stable against the wall with the bucket of the seat facing towards you. Now, if you were to do this without the seat down, just so you can see, it's just going to collapse and close. So you do need to make sure that the seat is facing down for it to stay open. I like to start on my knees here. It's just a little bit easier to get into. Place your hands in the bucket of the chair. Lift your knees. Step to a distance that feels right for you so you can feel that fold in your hips, keeping a bend in the knees. As we've been doing, sticking your toe back and pressing your hands into the bottom of the seat. Another variation you can do here that's very similar, a little bonus, is just to bring the hands to the legs. You can even just rest your forearms on the legs. You can play with feeling that wrap of your shoulders again, bringing a little bit more pressure into your index fingers, and then releasing your knees to the ground when you're ready. Now, as you can see, the last variation is a little bit more complicated in terms of prop setup. However, the way that you actually set this up is going to be dependent on your own proportions or the proportions of your student, as well as the proportions of the props themselves. My chair happens to have a little bit of a higher back than the average yoga chair, so I like to use blocks underneath my feet as well as my hands. And I've also placed this folded blanket here to rest my chest on. The blanket over the back is going to just be some padding for your hips. You can try the one folded blanket. If it still feels pretty intense, you can always set a second blanket, as well as using a second blanket to add a little bit of height for you. There are a lot of ways that you can modify this to work with what you do have if you don't have all of these props available. You could place a low stool or table or even a stack of books for you to place your hands on. And if you don't have blocks to go underneath your feet, you can place them on the wall, which is why I've set up close to the wall for this. And I'll show both variations. To begin, you'll stand behind the chair with the seat facing out. You want your hip crease to rest over the back of the chair. So it's not on your soft belly, it's not on your thighs, it's right there at that fold of the hips that we've been working on. Place your pubic bones and hip crease right over the back edge of the chair and begin to fold. Climb your hands down the arms of the chair down to the seat. And right away, if it's hard for you to keep your feet on the ground or to keep a bend in your knees, go ahead and step your feet up onto your blocks, or you can place the soles of your feet at the lower part of the wall. Making sure that you feel stable. Bend your elbows, bring your chest down. Extend your arms out, placing hands either to the floor or hands up onto blocks. Keep a bend in your knees so you have some leverage to move your pelvis. Soften your chest towards the seat of your chair. Stay here for as long as it feels good for you. As you're ready to come out of it, slowly bring your hands back onto the seat, feet back down to the blocks or floor. Take a moment in this half lift just to recalibrate your blood pressure, and then slowly come up to stand. And we will finish there today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, my name is Rebecca Jo. Please leave your questions and your feedback in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and come back for more. Until next time.